From Wilson Park, the city of Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration. And now to kick off today's celebration, our opening segment hosts, Michael Ellington and Kristen Pond.
Come on, help me. What else have we got back here?
Welcome to Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration. We have all sorts of activities planned for you today, demonstrations, but the best part is being here live to enjoy the celebration in person. Kristen?
Helping us cover this event today will be some other familiar faces from City Cable 22. Pat Newton and Darren Wright will be anchoring later on this afternoon so that Michael and I can get out and see the events. Mike Cohen will be doing interviews later on during the celebration, and we'll be bringing those to you.
All kinds of things will be happening here. There'll be mini steam engine rides and red car rides from 10 o'clock this morning until 2 this afternoon, or 5 this afternoon, and hot air balloon rides until 2 o'clock.
And we'll be having a fire department demonstration at 12 noon today.
Now, getting ready for a celebration like this is no mean task, and the city's been preparing for over a year, and most of those preparations have been covered by City Cable 22.
The red car will be giving free rides all day long at the park. The red car was restored and converted by Richard Fellows. A few weeks ago, we were able to catch up with him to get an early look at the restoration.
We'll be having some interviews for you with Mike Cohen. He's been talking with people all over this entire area. Wilson Park's a rather large park with ponds. If you've been down here, you know how beautiful it is. You can hear a few things going on in the background. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. We also have some footage from the opening ceremonies that were conducted this morning at Del Amo Mall.
A beautiful day outside in the city of Torrance and quite lovely inside here at the Del Amo Fashion Center. In just a few moments, you'll hear the mayor of Torrance, Katie Geiser, welcome 50 75-year-olds here at the Del Amo Fashion Center. A lot of things happening here, some marvelous things happening at Wilson Park, but when Katie says her hello to the 50 75-year-olds, you'll be hearing, and you just heard some notes in the background, the North High Jazz Band and the North High Chorus. And these 75-year-olds will be the first ones to try in our grab bag here at the Del Amo Fashion Center, where zirconia and diamonds given away in rings in these grab bags. And there is a line which extends, and I'm not kidding you here, about 2 blocks along this fashion center. So a lot of things happening here.
We'd like to thank the North High School Band under the direction of Robert Laxton, been entertaining us. We want to wish you happy birthday, all of you people who are sitting out here in the white chairs. This is the 75th birthday of the city of Torrance, as well as these Torrance residents who are being honored today. It's a great day, all day today. In addition to the festivities here, there will be festivities at Wilson Park. We invite you, after you've participated in this, to stop on by. I think that you'll have a good time over there. Once again, I want to thank Robert Laxton and his band from North High School for the wonderful entertainment, and let's give them another hand. I'd like to introduce at this time my colleagues on the City Council who are with us this morning, and they've joined me to wish you all a happy birthday. First of all, I'll start just down at the end of the line, Councilman George Nakano. Our newest council member, Councilwoman Dee Hardison. Our most senior council member, Bill Applegate. Our in-between council member, Mark Worth. Councilman Tim Mock. And our second most senior council member, Dan Walker. And joining us also representing the city manager is Albert Ng, our assistant city manager. At this time, I'd like to introduce the North High School Highlights, chorus from North High. It's directed by Thelma Sanborn, and they will first sing the national anthem and ask you all to stand and join in. If you'll all be seated, the highlights will entertain us with Adaruff and then America the Beautiful. come to the special part of the program, the introduction of our honorees, the Torrance residents who this year have turned or will turn 75 years old. There are gifts for each of the honorees under the chairs and more good things to come after this program. But at this time, I'd like to introduce each of the honorees and ask him or her to stand. And I will mention also the number of years that each person has lived in the city of Torrance. First of all, it gives me great pleasure, we're doing this alphabetically, to introduce a good friend of mine who's lived in Torrance for 48 years, Margaret Alter. Margaret? Our next honoree has lived in Torrance for 37 years. Would Robert Ansos please stand? Congratulations, Robert. The next honoree is a very active lady in the city. She's lived here for 20 years, an active volunteer, Frida Babin. Our next honoree is Ann Banton, who's lived in Torrance for 15 years. Congratulations, Ann. Our next honoree moved to Torrance from Detroit 14 years ago, and her name is Jean Bentley. Jean, another active volunteer. Sylvia Breitberg is our next honoree, and she's lived in Torrance for 30 years, sister of Diane Sharpman. Our next honoree was modest, didn't put down how long he'd lived in Torrance, Frances Caserta. Or she, pardon me. Our next honoree has lived in Torrance for 24 years, Salvatore Casella. The next honoree, Adele Ice. Our next honoree was born in 1912 in Worcester, Massachusetts, has lived in Torrance for 17 years, Anna Contildis. Harriet Craig was born in Seattle, Washington in 1912, but has lived in Torrance for 36 years. Congratulations. Arthur Davis was born on Valentine's Day in Corning, New York in 1912. He's lived in Torrance for 18 years. Arthur Davis. And Marion Davis was also born in 1912 and is Arthur's wife. Congratulations to this couple. Our next honoree is Teresa Elke, who was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1912 and has lived in Torrance for 12 years. Our next honoree has lived in Torrance for 17 years and was born in Minnesota, George Hadjicek. Marion Hatch was born in Richland, Washington in 1912, and we wish her a happy birthday today. Our next honoree was born in Salt Lake City in 1912. He's been in Torrance for 25 years. It's Hap Atkinson. Linda Henry has been in Torrance for 13 years. She was born in Lehigh, Kansas in 1912. Congratulations. Our next honoree is Helen Henderson. And we don't have the number of years in Torrance, but it's a long time. Congratulations, Helen. Now, the next individual has been in Torrance for 47 years. William Johnson. Congratulations, William. Our next honoree was born in Oahu, Hawaii in 1912, has been a Torrance resident for 14 years, Larry Kakagawa. And his wife is also 75 years old this year, Miyuko Kakagawa. Our next honoree has been in Torrance for 35 years, Joseph Lauterbach. Congratulations, Joseph. Thelma Wallace has lived in Torrance for 36 years, and we wish her happy birthday today. Now, this may be a record. The next honoree has been in Torrance for 65 years, Dorothy Herring. Congratulations. Our next honoree doesn't have the number of years that he's lived in Torrance, but I'm sure it's a long time. Robert Midnosta. Congratulations, Robert. Our next honoree has been in Torrance for 39 years. If she'd stand so we can applaud her, Beatrice Moore. Joe Odell was born in West Virginia in 1912, but has called Torrance home for 33 years. Congratulations. Rachel Ostroff was born in Seattle, Washington in 1912, and has called Torrance home for 13 years. Congratulations, Rachel. Well, I said that one of these was a record, but this beats it. The next honoree has lived in Torrance for 55 years. Glenn Harriman. Congratulations, Glenn. You're a real old timer. Is it 65? First was higher. Okay. Annie Lee Power was born in Dyer County, Tennessee in 1912, but has been a Torrance resident for 26 years. Congratulations. Now here's a lady who's been in Torrance for 40 years, Laura Rito. She was born in 1912 in Ohio. Congratulations. Now this lady has lived in Torrance off and on since 1927. And if my addition is right, that's 60 years. Marguerite Rice. Congratulations, Marguerite. Is Mildred Sergio, who was born in Ohio in 1912 and has called Torrance home for 5 years. Congratulations to you, Mildred. Burton Washburn has been a Torrance resident for 23 years. He was born in Corona, California, out among the orange groves in 1912. Congratulations. Our next honoree has been a Torrance resident for 30 years. She was born in Bangor, Maine in 1912. Would you please congratulate with your applause our last honoree, Dorothy Wasville. Brandy, I was just handed a card. Says that there's another person with us today, Helen Hendrickson, who is 75 years old this year and has lived in Torrance since 1940. So would Helen please raise her hand? She's over here. All right. Let's give Helen Hendrickson a hand, and Brandy will arrange some gifts for her at the end of the program. Under the chairs of the honorees, there are a number of gifts, and I'm sure that most of the honorees have discovered that little goodie bag underneath the chairs. In addition to the things in the goodie bag is a pictorial history of Torrance, California. It's a beautiful book, and it will be on sale later today over at Wilson Park, where the festivities are taking place. But some of the merchants at the center today who have helped in honoring these people and have wanted to share in gifts with them are Mrs. Fields Cookies, Helen Grace Chocolates, Hickory Farms, Keepsake Portraits, the Good Earth Restaurant, and the Kitchen Emporium. So, Randy, I believe that this concludes our formal program. I'd like at this time, I see someone who just arrived, Miss Torrance, Renee Kenneth. Renee, come forward and be recognized, will you? It gives me great pleasure to introduce to all of you Miss Torrance. Now, at the end of these ceremonies, we want to ask the 75-year-old honorees and all the city officials to remain in their seats because there will be an official portrait taking. But at this time, I would like to ask the North High School Band and the Highlights and all of you to join in singing happy birthday to all these wonderful people, as well as to the city of Torrance.
Welcome back to Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration from Wilson Park. And there's going to be a barbecue dinner a little bit later. We'll be showing you some footage from that. Sorry you couldn't be here for it. There are all kinds of food booths here all over Wilson Park, and people are enjoying the 75th anniversary celebration. Eyes being filled with an entire array of events and displays, as well as food down here. Right now we're going to be taking a listen to some music going on behind us from the El Camino Community Band. Kristen, can you tell us a little bit about the band?
That's right. That's going to be the that's going to be the ECC band. That's going to be directed by Gerald Thatcher. The band is 11 years old, and it is part of a class at ECC Thursday evenings, and it is open to any interested parties. There's no limit to the size of the class or the band. There are now 40 people in that band, and some have been with the band since the beginning, spring and fall semesters. They play everything from marches to Broadway tunes. There are some solos and certain instruments, classical and pop.
Brass, woodwind, and percussion are all in this band, but there are no strings. They don't charge for performances, and they're here to help Torrance celebrate its 75th anniversary. This group can be seen all over the South Bay area, all the beach communities. And today they'll be playing pieces by Vivaldi, Handel, Marvin Hamlish, and other American folk songs. Let's give a listen now to the El Camino Community Band. We're listening to music from the El Camino Community Band, and don't they sound good? Kind of kicking off the entire 75th anniversary celebration here in Torrance. They're under the pavilion. They were supposed to be in the gazebo, but we had a few changes when the weather turned good, and aren't we glad? And isn't it warm? Anyway, we'll be listening to a bit more music, but to kind of sprinkle in to today's coverage, we'll be giving you a little bit of Torrance's background. For example, did you know that Jared Sidney Torrance, founder of our city, was instrumental in starting the Rose Parade? The city entered its first float in 1914, 2 years after the city was incorporated, with the theme, The Power and the Beauty of Torrance Industry. We'll give you a few more of these Torrance trivial facts in a few minutes, but now let's listen again to the El Camino Community Band.
much. Thank you.
The original layout of the city was designed by the Olmsted Brothers architecture firm of Boston, Massachusetts, whose other credits include Stanford University and New York City's Central Park.
In 1922, Mayo Fessler of the Torrance Chamber of Commerce said, "Where worth, not wealth, gives standing to men, where interest in public affairs is a test of citizenship and devotion to the public good is a badge of honor." Torrance, where people of all the earth can come and be blended into one community life, and where each generation will vie with the next, with the past rather, to transmit to the next, a city greater, better, and more beautiful than the last. 65 years later, those words still ring true. And we're continuing now with more of Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration.
Community Band. For more information, you can call El Camino College at 532-3670.
And I'd like to hear one more, come on, you gave me that,
Earlier during the week, we were able to do an interview with Mayor Katie Geiser. Let's take a look at that interview right now.
I haven't been here for 75 years in Torrance or anywhere, but some of it I know by hearsay and, and by the history. Certainly the decision that Jared Sidney Torrance made back in 1912 to found the modern industrial city was a significant event, and the city wouldn't be here today as we know if it weren't for that decision that he made. I would think that a significant event along the way in the 1920s was the discovery of oil, the significant Torrance oil field discovery. Prior to that time, the major industry in Torrance, or industries, were related to steel production. Torrance was known in the early years as the Pittsburgh of the West, or I think that was wishful thinking on Mr. Torrance's part. It didn't ever quite reach the size of Pittsburgh, and fortunately did not end up with some of the problems that Pittsburgh had as a result of the steel mills. And the course of the industrial development in the city was somewhat sidetracked in the 20s by the discovery of wells and the covering of the landscape, if you will, by the wooden derricks, the oil derricks, and we've all seen pictures of that. I would say another significant landmark for the city of Torrance was right in the years right after World War II, when many of the returning servicemen decided to settle in Southern California and located in Torrance. And this led to the just mass development of housing in the city of Torrance, and the population jumped in a very short period of time from about 13,000 people to over 100,000. And probably 90% of the housing in the city was built in those years, in the 50s and the early 60s. The city was hard-pressed at that time to keep up with providing the basic services with the water, the sewer systems, and the schools. We did live here during those years, moved to Torrance in 1952, and saw some of that amazing growth. I think that we're at another landmark period in the city now where we have seen the heavy industry beginning to phase out. The steel mills are gone, and in their place is clean industry, much more sophisticated structures, and I think by and large upscale and to the benefit of the city. And we have also seen from the days when the city grew so rapidly and they were hard-pressed to keep up with the building of basic services, the rounding out of the city. The providing of cultural opportunities in the city, the facilities for those, and playing catch-up, as we know, in some of the other city services and city buildings. If I had a crystal ball, in the near future, I think that everything is rosy. The city has, as I say, rounded out and filled in some of the gaps. It's a very, very desirable place to live, to locate a business. I would hope that people in the future, residents and whoever they elect to represent them, will have the wisdom to maintain the quality of life in this community, to not be too bedazzled by commercial opportunities, to maintain the integrity of neighborhoods, and to provide the opportunity for keeping those neighborhoods in good shape and upscale.
And that was Mayor Katie Geisert. She's very optimistic about Torrance's future and appreciative to be leading such a community as Torrance. Right now, we're going to be taking a look at some footage we have on the red car. Only way to get around in the early 20s in Torrance and the surrounding area was the red car. It was on tracks, hooked to a cable. If you wanted to go from point A to point B, the red car was the way to go if you didn't want to walk. It went in and out of the bit of architecture that's most easily associated with Torrance. That's the bridge that goes across Torrance Boulevard. If you go down Torrance Boulevard, you can see remnants of what once was track laid for the red car, and the depot, the main depot for the red car that passed through that same area. There's a red car here today in Wilson Park driving people around, giving them a bit of nostalgia. It's on a truck chassis. It's been refurbished completely by Mr. Richard Fowler, I believe his name is, and it's driving about. We'll have a little bit of footage right now for you.
And
a lot of folks entering the red car. Pacific Electric. We're with Fred Nykus, the conductor. And Fred, this dates back, what, to 1913?
1913, built by the Jewett Car Company.
And restored, what, in the 60s?
1962 by Richard Fellows.
And it would traverse along the streets of Torrance. Where exactly?
Basically, most any route on the PE, via San Pedro, via Torrance, Long Beach line, out to Venice, most any system.
This red car with an undercarriage of tires, but before then, what, it was on tracks?
The steel wheels on steel rail, electric power from an overhead, 600 volt DC.
And is there anywhere in the United States, Fred Nykus, where the red car still operates?
There's several in the museum of the PE, be the Orange Empire Railway Museum out in Paris, where this car operates. There's one also up at Rio Vista in Northern California.
The red car obviously very popular today on the 75th anniversary of the founding of Torrance. Where else might we find this Pacific Electric red car?
This particular one?
Indeed. Other events?
Other civic functions. We do civic functions and movie work. We've been not only this centennial, but also the centennials of West Covina, Monrovia, Pasadena this past year.
And Fred, as a child, always the interest in trains, rail cars?
Pretty much so. Although the system was pretty much gone before I knew it existed, the interest in railroad has always been around.
And a lot of interested people here as well as they get upon the red car. City of Torrance, 75th anniversary.
We're at Charles Wilson Park for Torrance's 75th anniversry celebration. And did you know that in 1956, Torrance was named All-America City by the National Municipal League? Part of the campaign launched to win that distinction involved written testimonials from the children of Torrance. One eager student wrote, "We have fun at our park. We have nice streets. We like the weather. We have nice schools." And that about sums up Torrance here on a day we thought it was going to rain. It turned out to be sunny and hot. Kristen?
A number of Torrance residents have made a name for themselves in the entertainment industry.
I'd like to hear. Anybody
Chuck
know?
Norris graduated from North High School here in Torrance. Rosemary DeCamp and Bo Derek listed Torrance as their hometown. And Paul Moyer, news anchor for KABC TV, was also raised in Torrance.
In just a couple of minutes, while they're setting up, we're going to be listening to a group known all throughout Torrance and most of the South Bay. That's the Torrance Kitchen Band from Bartlett Center.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr.
Kitchen
Neil
bands
Henry.
get their name, of course, from the instruments they use. They're ordinary items you'd find in your kitchen.
Ladies
Was
and
founded in
gentlemen.
1972 at Bartlett Center. There are 20 members in the band, and a few other things about them include
Okay, they are a volunteer group that is funded by charitable donations. They use other things like washboards, glasses, bottles, pots, pans, and a saw, and are accompanied by a piano. Interestingly, the oldest member is 91.
So let's give a listen now to the Torrance Kitchen Band.
Traveling up and down the South Bay area. The first 5 years of which we entertained 50 times a year. The last 9 years, we have entertained an average of about 60 times a year. This is one of our feature events. Each time we played, we said that we were from the most beautiful city in California, Torrance, California. Not only that, but we have something else to brag about. We have the most beautiful mayor in the state of California, too. You notice that our instruments are made from gadgets usually found around the kitchen. Even our handsaw, it's always hanging behind the stove in the kitchen. All of our instruments are made from gadgets found around the kitchen except the piano. We are indeed fortunate to have South California's most talented pianist, Miss Charlotte. Miss Charlotte Rubin. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you, from your very own beautiful city of Torrance, California, the Torrance Kitchen Band.
How about a big hand, Jim? No one's older than 35. about a big hand for these lovely people? Come on, the Torrance Kitchen Band. Aren't they delightful? Sing along with them, come on. How about a big hand, Torrance Kitchen Band.
coverage of the 75th anniversary of Torrance. That was the Torrance Kitchen Band.
And I understand the oldest member is 91 years old. I hope I can still move that well when I'm 91.
That's right.
I have my kazoo, but I haven't tuned it, so that's why I wasn't playing with him.
You're doing better than me, Michael.
Listen. Anyway, next up we'll be having an interview with Bill Applegate of the City Council. He has a few thoughts on Torrance's 75 years in existence. Let's roll that interview right now.
Well, I think the planned birth of Torrance is probably the most significant event that we've had. When Jared Sidney Torrance came to the area which is now known as the City of Torrance and decided to develop an industrial city, I think was probably the single most significant event. I believe that there was a period of time during the 1920s when people didn't realize what this would one day become. And as we all know, Torrance is just an outstanding city and one of the most outstanding cities in the nation today. During the 1920s through to the 1950s, I think Torrance developed like many other cities did in the United States. But then in the 1950s, there was an explosion of residential housing and other services that came into our community. And with 90% of the housing within the city being built during that period of time, I think that becomes the second significant event because that set the pattern or the mold that we have for our city today. Well, 10 years ago when I first got involved with city government, I was asked a very similar question. And it was, what did I perceive to be the future of the city of Torrance? And back then we had companies such as U.S. Steel and Armco and a lot of other old line companies, some of which had their roots back to the early 1920s when Torrance was first born. And back then I had indicated 10 years ago that I felt that Torrance had developed itself on the east and then followed its way west to the ocean. And I really believe that the redevelopment of Torrance would then start again on the east side, and that we would eventually work our way west to the ocean, and that we would see that cycling take place because of the age of the buildings, the housings, the housing, the use, and the other things that we have. It seemed to be a natural transition for us to go through.
And that was Bill Applegate from the Torrance City Council. A little bit more of Torrance trivia for you to think about. Kristen, what do you got?
Okay, even though electronics and aerospace are Torrance's present-day industry, here's a bit of trivia you might be interested in hearing. The first industry in Torrance was greenhousing. T.H. Wright opened greenhouses here in 1907, 5 years before the city was founded. Specializing in orchids and gardenias, by 1936, Mr. Wright supplied half of all the gardenias sold in New York City.
We also have the Torrance Rotary.
And the land on which Torrance was built was originally a 75,000-acre Spanish land grant called Rancho San Pedro. The original grantee, Juan Jose Dominguez, an ordinary soldier, served on the frontier of New Spain for 25 continuous years. He was given the land grant 2 years after he retired in 1784. That's one whopping pension. Anyway, next up, an interview with Dee Hardison of the City Council. She was interviewed earlier last week. Let's take a look at that interview right now. Again, everyone looking back on Torrance's 75 years.
Well, of course, I haven't been around for 75 years. Only been in the city of Torrance for 20 years, but obviously there were many events that were important in the development of Torrance. The first one, obviously, was Mr. Jared Sidney Torrance. He laid out the city of Torrance. It was a very planned community, and I think the things that have happened in the last 75 years have been planned for in this community, and I think that's the things that make it the great community. A couple of other things that come to mind that I think have added to the greatness of Torrance is that when the school district became part of, the Torrance School District became part of the city and broke off from LA and formed their own school district. I think to be a viable community, you obviously have to have an excellent school district. Other things that come to mind, obviously, the development of the shopping center, the Del Amo Shopping Center, even though it sometimes now is a cross to bear with the traffic, but it's very important for the sales tax to this community, for the base. Other points that I think might be important would also be obviously the honors through the years as the All-American City And most recently, I believe, in a significant event that will, for years afterwards, from now on, will be important to us, was the obtaining of the Madrona Marsh. I think this late in our development to be able to come up with that kind of land, open space, near the metropolitan area of our community was very important, and certainly will be an historical event in the city as we go on. But as I thought back over the last 75 years, I kept thinking that I would think of more events, and there certainly are. But I think partly what makes the city so great is that it hasn't taken events to make the city the great city. It's taken day-to-day operation and doing the things that need to be done. Torrance will change in the next 75 years. All cities need to change. You cannot stagnate. I think that we will see growth because we're recycling in the city. Hopefully we will see controlled growth so we can handle the growth. I would hope in the next 75 years the city would come up with a way to, in a regional manner, to solve the transportation problems. That's most crucial. We will soon be at the point we'll be able to move in the city if not. And it's going to take an organized manner. I would expect if I came back in 75 years, we would have some sort of a fine transportation system. And basically, I would hope not too much else would change. I think homes will look more modern, things will look different, but there's a specialness to the city of Torrance today, and I would hope we would never lose that specialness, that sort of small town aspect. And so I would maybe not want to see lots of changes when I came back in 75 years, because I think it's kind of great the way it is right now. Can I add another point or two? Yes, I'd like to say, I know this is the 75th birthday of the city, and of course many people will be participating with us today in the 75th activities and throughout the year. And I think that it certainly is a privilege for me to have been involved with the 75th birthday and some of the aspects that are happening. We've done some fantastic things through the year. We've discovered some history of Torrance just recently. And I think just people being here and being involved is history enough, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Getting ready to go right now behind us here as part of Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration is a look back on some of that history. The Torrance Historical Society will be presenting a series of vignettes that will be highlighting highlights of Torrance's 75-year incorporated history and bring you a little bit closer to why today is a special day in this community's history. Let's take a look now. We'll be hearing from Janet Payne and former Mayor Ken Miller. So let's take a look.
With a top hat and hand out brochures and campaigns, stop each car as they went by. Chickens, and he was elected mayor and he lasted 1 year. He got in a fight in the chamber during the intermissions, and as a result, council meetings were very hectic. He used to campaign up and down the streets and created such a exposure to politics that politics for years after were never the same in Torrance. And I remember many years ago when I was about 8 years old, one of the council candidates hired me for 50 cents an hour to pass out brochures. Another one found out about it, wanted to pay me $1 for burning them. And as a result, that's my first exposure, at least, to politics. But as we went through the years, the people who really made this city are sitting behind me. And I want to take just this moment to introduce some of them and have them say just a few words. First of all, and it's a real pleasure for me to introduce this lady, because when I was, again, 7 or 8 years old, I lived next door to her on Gramercy, and they used to babysit me. That goes back. Mrs. Zamperini, who I'm going to introduce, is 90 years old today, and she arrived in Torrance in 1920, and she's been here ever since. She had 2 sons, 2 famous sons, Pete and Louis Zamperini, and I'd like to have them come up with their mother and say a few words. I think most of you may know at least the history on Louis Zamperini. Louis was a famous miler. He made the Olympic team in 1936 at, I think, age 17, and ran in the Berlin Games in 1936. After the war broke out, he had attended USC, was one of the really truly great milers in the United States at that time. The war broke out and he went overseas to the Pacific. He was shot down and was on a raft. I believe it was 47 days until the Japanese captured him. He spent the rest of his time in a prison camp during the war and was actually given up for dead. But I remember his mother refused to acknowledge that. She had a room in her house in Gramercy that she kept just in place with all his medals intact, and until he came back. And sure enough, when the war ended, they found him in a Japanese prison camp, and Louis came back after that and joined the Billy Graham Crusade. This time I'd like to introduce Mrs. Zamperini and Louis Zamperini and Pete Zamperini.
I'm 90 years old, and I'm so happy to be here to celebrate the 75th anniversary of Torrance. And I hope I can live to be 100, so I can celebrate the 100th anniversary here of Torrance. And I want to thank everybody that from Torrance. I'm sorry I can't.
Thanks, Mother. If she lives to be 100, and she'll be back at the next celebration, I probably won't be here. But this is a great occasion, really, having started in Torrance at 2 years of age and seeing the progress, starting with a population of about 4,000 up to over 200,000 now. And to see a great occasion such as this, the people of Torrance gathering together to celebrate the 75th anniversary of this great, what we call modern industrial city. This is my brother Pete. He was my first coach. He had a very unorthodox method of training. He'd get behind me with about a 4-foot switch, and I had to outrun him or I felt the switch, and so I decided to outrun him, and so I give him all the credit for whatever I did in track and field to Coach Pete Zamperini, my brother. Pete, you got a few words to say?
Looks like a good brother act. Actually, when Miller said that we babysat him, he forgot to tell you that we used to change his diapers at that time. He lived next door. But babysitting him at that period wasn't the end of it. I babysat him in high school when I was his high school coach. I had him in there for 4 years. He had a little trouble in school. His toughest 3 years in school was in the 4th grade. I'm very happy to be here. I don't know whether Louis didn't mention it, but there's going to be some airplanes flying over later on, and he's going to be flying in one of those airplanes going over and scouting the city of Torrance again. We've been here since 1920, and at that time, I have to get this in, Carson was the only paved street running east and west. It was a state highway. My dad, who passed away in 1975, said, hey, he says, I don't think I'll ever live to see the day that they have sidewalks and that street is repaved. And as he passed away in 75, now I hope that I live to see the day that we have sidewalks on Carson Street. That was the only street into town, in through and into over to Redondo Beach. But we have come a long ways in 75 years, and I'm very, very happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
For those of you that are interested in airplanes, you know what a Stearman is. That was the primary trainer at the beginning of World War II. The prototype to that airplane was what they called the Cloud Boy. And that's a 1920 airplane, and that will be the lead plane today. That'll be the plane that I will fly in today. There were only 10 of these aircrafts made, and today in the entire world there are only 2 of these aircraft, and one of them is based right here at the field. And thanks to Art Valdez, he has provided the vintage racing cars and also the airplanes for the flyover today. So we can be grateful for that.
Thank you, Zamperinis. There is the history of Torrance right there in compact form. Those people where Lewis particularly put the city of Torrance on the map way back in the 30s and 40s. At this time, I would like to call Marshall Stewart forward. Marshall Stewart of the Hollywood Riviera. I'd like to ask Marshall, who's one of the originals in the city of Torrance, a couple questions that were prepared to be asked. All right. Your dad was, Roy, was the brother-in-law of Clifford Reed.
That's right.
First developed the Hollywood Riviera in 1927, and Clifford Reed's name is well known in the community. And he managed the Hollywood Riviera Beach Club before it had burned down. Roy lives on Via Linda Vista, and it was the second home built in the Riviera after the Reeds on Monte d'Oro. I'd appreciate just a few comments from you, Marshall, about your father and mother, and how did they come to follow the Reeds in the Riviera?
Relatives. My uncle developed North Hollywood and also the Riviera and Toluca Lake area, and was one of the early developers in Southern California, and followed the same pattern that many developers did, of bringing people down from all over that were here visiting and selling the property there. And it developed into a very beautiful community, which I am very proud to still be in since 1929. There's many things that have happened in the Riviera. Bootleggers used to run across it when they were bringing materials in those days. I remember the glider field that was on top of the hill for all during the 30s, which they used to fly gliders off every Sunday. I remember one of the big things for a child growing up there was the wide open spaces. And one time those wide open spaces down near the beach was occupied by the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And they came to Redondo by rail and marched the elephants through Redondo, and we got to go to a circus. It's probably one of the few times that the full-blown Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus was ever in Torrance. But it was a wonderful place to grow up. We were isolated from Torrance in those days, regrettably, but it's still a marvelous community. I'm proud to be there.
Thank you very much, Marshall. That's fine. Now I'd like to call Bob Amatsu forward. The Amatsu family, again, is another pioneer family in the city of Torrance. Did a lot of farming here for the war years, and Bob is in the so-called famous Amatsu strawberry farm picture that's in the Torrance Museum. I'd just like to ask Bob how he came to be born in the old Torrance Memorial Hospital that was located on Ingratius Street in Torrance. Bob?
The thing is that my parents were in the farming business, and my grandfather was farming in Fresno, and my parents came down here to Torrance because they said this would be the best place for strawberries. And that's one of the reasons why I was born here in Torrance.
Tell us a little bit about the farming that took place on Hawthorne Boulevard near Anza when many Japanese Americans farmed that land, and the Amatsu family was one of them. Would you give us a little background on that, Bob?
Well, you know, I was born during the Depression, and we all had our hard times. But as the years progressed, all the Japanese Americans, the Issei people, we all worked hard and got to the point we are now.
Just a comment about Bob. His folks were interned in Utah in 1942, and after their internment and after the war, they returned to Torrance to start over completely, although they were Native Americans at that time. You were in the first kindergarten class at the new Fern Elementary School built by Los Angeles County to replace the temporary buildings back in 1929. Would you like to reflect a little bit on your elementary background?
I sure do. We had this, they said it was Fern Avenue School, where right now the school I started was where Greenwood School is now. It was just one bunch of wooden bungalow schools. I started my kindergarten class there. When the Fern Avenue was completed, we started there, our first kindergarten class.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate you coming. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce what I think is the First Lady of the City of Torrance, a lady that served many, many years on the school board, served for the Torrance Memorial Board of Directors, Board of Trustees rather, for 9 years, and who has been a real staunch supporter of our city. I'd like at this time to introduce Polly Watts. I have a couple questions to ask Polly and let her take it from there. I think the message is you arrived in Torrance because of a romance. Is that correct? And that was Kenny Watts, her husband, and he lived in Torrance at that time, actually since 1932. What street did he live on?
Kenneth lived on Earl Street in what was then the Victor Tract, and he ran a sail business and made racing yacht sails, which he shipped all over the world. And I think of particular interest to Torrance is the fact that I had not been in Torrance for, I guess, maybe 8 years or a little more, when the county decided that it no longer wanted county islands. And so they held an election to have that district decide whether they would merge with Redondo Beach or with Torrance. That's the area that is between Torrance Boulevard on the south and Del Amo Boulevard on the north, the west side of Hawthorne for their eastern boundary, and the Torrance boundary now on the west side. That election was held, but only the registered voters got a chance to participate in the decision. So the people that owned the property, if they didn't live there to vote, they didn't get any choice in the matter. But our family wanted so much for that to be a part of Torrance that Kenneth's mother spent all that election day calling people that she knew in the area, and she and Kenneth's father still lived on the Earl Street property so they could vote. And I drove people to the polls all that afternoon, and the Victor Tract came into Torrance by less than 10 votes. As I remembered, it was 7 votes that made the difference.
Well, you know, Polly, in commenting on the Victor Annex, that property west of Hawthorne Boulevard one time was just all county property back in the 50s. And Polly was very instrumental in leading the fight to annex that property to make it part of the city of Torrance, which it eventually became. And everything from Hawthorne Boulevard west, literally, to Henrietta Street area was incorporated in the city of Torrance that years, and Polly was very instrumental in doing that. Now I'd like to introduce our former Park and Recreation Superintendent, Director, Harry Van Bellum, who is another real pioneer in the city. I'd like to ask Harry, when did you come to Torrance, and how many parks did we have then, and how many when you left?
Well, I came to work for the city of Torrance in 1953, and I think we had 4 parks, and I don't know how many we had when I left. I really don't. It was 15 or 16 or maybe more, I don't know. But it was a very happy experience here in Torrance. There was no way else to go except up, and it was very pleasant to be on the ride up. And when we got up to the top, I got off. So that's about it, Ken.
Not yet, Harry. You know, when I was mayor back between 1970 and 78, we wanted this Navy surplus property for a park, but we couldn't afford to buy it. The Navy owned it. And Harry was one of the forerunners, and along with Ed Farrell, Stan Remmelmeyer, to acquire this land. And if I recall correctly, after a lot of political pressure and naming it after Charles Wilson, we were able to obtain it from the Navy for, I think it was $5,000 an acre, if I recall at the time, or $250,000. It was probably worth $75,000, $80,000 at that time. And that's how Wilson Park got its beginning. You know, Harry probably could talk a long time about some of the eccentric developers he had to deal with in acquiring land when they put in developments. But I'd like to ask him, how did you get into recreation programs as a professional, and what led you to Torrance?
Well, I'd worked in recreation in Long Beach back in '31. We used to build rowboats and sailboats, and we taught sailing and rowing, and I reached an agreement with Long Beach that would allow us to rent them on the beach if we teach classes in it. And then I eventually went to work for Long Beach, later Beverly Hills, after the war, LA County, and then when I couldn't take the county driving anymore, I came down to where I've lived since 1938. I've lived here in Torrance since '38. One thing I'm going to have to tell about Ken Miller. When we built parks in the old days, many of the time that we had to go out and get dedication of the land from Henry Genzer or Kenny Battram or different people. And the Victor Women's Club back in the 50s wanted to build a building on Victor Park. And they were on a money-raising spree, and they were within a few dollars of having enough to build a building. So they had a big blowout at the old Torrance Theater, and Ken Miller was one of the can-can dancers in costume. One of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life was Ken standing up to the wall, you know, holding his skirt up, and a drunken man came in, and I've never forgotten that.
What Harry doesn't tell you, he was also in that can-can line. I would just like to express our appreciation for our music director and city cable staff who has played for us today, Peter Lefevre, and we do appreciate it. You know, it was very difficult to get a group like this together with considering a long list of outstanding citizens to choose from. But these people have been the movers and shakers of the community. They've been the backbone of it as it went through many ups and downs, and we certainly appreciate that they're showing up here today. They could, if you could get them aside and talk to them, and they can give you so much history. It's just unfortunate that time is so brief that we can't get into it. But again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for showing up, and thank you for attending. I'm sorry, I forgot one little thing. The mayor. I didn't see you. I want to introduce our mayor, Katie Geiser, and when they give me the cards, there was no name there.
All right, that's me, no name. Anyway, I do want to join with Ken Miller, who is one of the old-timers in Torrance, was born here, raised here, and can tell stories like along with the best of them. But do want to join with him in thanking all of you for coming out, helping celebrate your city's 75th birthday. And stick around, things are going a little slowly today because of the rain. The hot air balloons are on their way. They ran into some washed out roads and so on. There's a lot to do, so stay around. But I do want to join with Ken in recognizing the several people who were interviewed here today. These are the people who built this city, who made the city great, and you're the people who are carrying on the fine tradition. We're happy to have you here to celebrate the history of this city, which is really pretty fascinating. So have a good day.
The Torrance Historical Society has kept up on the history of Torrance and has preserved it with vignettes like what you've just seen. They're managing to keep that history alive for generations to come. And on a lighter note, we have a little more trivia. Recreation and leisure activities, though limited, were important to the early community. Walter Wren's Motion Picture House, located on the ground floor of the Myrtle Apartments, opened in late 1912 with the silent movie, The Perils of Pauline.
I remember I've seen footage from Perils of Pauline. She was always falling off a cliff or something, having a rough time of it. Yeah. And back around that same time in 1912, the Industrial Revolution was well on its way and the unions were looking for a foothold. Jared Sidney Torrance's goal in founding the city of Torrance was to develop a modern industrial community where both industry and workers could coexist in mutual respect. 10 years later, his dream was fulfilled. Right now, we're going to take you to an interview we did earlier with City Councilman Tim Mock. He has some things to say about Torrance's past and where Torrance is going in the future. Here's Tim Mock.
Well, the Torrance has sort of evolved from a small company town into one of the leading South Bay or Los Angeles area leading economic booming towns in terms of the kinds of economy we have now. Is entirely different what we had then. When Torrance was first developed, it was basically oil and heavy machine equipment. Union Tool Company, those types of workers it was a company type of town. But as World War II ended and the baby boom started and young families started moving to the suburbs, Torrance took a drastic change, and aerospace was a primary motivating factor in those changes. And I think that's been the greatest change in Torrance, and you can just see the kinds of people that have moved in and made an influence on Torrance has been since the 1950s and 60s in the aerospace industry. The population went up drastically. Torrance became much more cohesive in terms of demanding its own services, the library services, the own school system, and it just broadened itself tremendously. Instead of a local small company town of a few thousand, it grew into 140,000 residents. But the thing that's really impressed me about Torrance, considering I grew up here, my parents moved here at that same time, 1954, and my father was an engineer with the aerospace industry, and so that's the same type of thing that we went through. But what's impressed me the most has been the local community has not lost that touch. The small local community, a small company town where everybody knew each other, has not lost that touch because everybody, it's a large enough city to provide the resources of its own transit system, its own fire department, police department, own library system, as I said, but has not lost that touch of knowing your neighbor, being able to be responsive to City Hall. If you come down and you have a complaint, people respond to you and really feel interested in you instead of just being part of the bureaucracy and just living as a one big, huge city. It's large enough to have those resources, but it's small enough to feel that personal character that we all enjoy. Well, as I said, the change from the heavy industrial has gone over to high tech. We're having major companies come in like Honda, and those are headquarter cities, and also computer systems. Epson Corporation is building a headquarters here. The change in type of services and employment within Torrance will definitely change the character of how people view Torrance. I think as we were expanding in terms of jobs, in terms of shopping centers, that was very important. I think people wanted economic success in Torrance. But now that economic success and that growth that we've provided has sometimes caused problems like traffic gridlock and things of that nature. And I think that's where people are going to be much more concerned about how we deal with the problems, especially City Hall, in terms of developments and how people interplay with one another. I think that Torrance will always keep the character of being sort of a hometown type of Mayberry RFD, if you want to consider that in that retrospect, where everyone has a feeling that they can share each other's ideas and know each other and have a common root and common base. That this is still a large city, but it's not large enough that we miss each other in terms of the crossroads, saying that we're just strangers to one another. That we're still a small town type of mentality, but at a large scale with large resources.
I see you have a guest with you.
Yeah, I'd like to. My daughter, when I told my daughter that I was going to talk about Torrance, she asked if she could come along and wish Torrance a happy birthday. So I thought my daughter Annie and I would wish Torrance a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Torrance.
Okay, that was City Council Member Tim Mock. And up next we have City Council Member George Nakano, an interview with him on his views on Torrance's 75th anniversary.
I think when you look at the past 75 years, I think the greatest change has occurred, I would say, the last 40 years. And three events that I could think of would be, first would be housing development in the South Bay area, in particular Torrance, which had a significant increase in population. The other two would be, when City of Torrance embarked on the redevelopment project on the east side to revitalize that particular area. And then the other one is when the city was able to bring in the major shopping center, which is the Del Amo Fashion Center that we have today. I think those three events had a significant impact on what we have today in the city of Torrance. I would say as a result of that, we have, as a city, the major center for the industry and commerce for South Bay. For example, as I mentioned before, Alamo Fashion Square is the largest indoor shopping mall in the United States, and it has a significant impact as far as the revenue for the city is concerned. As far as the industry is concerned, we now have Honda and Toyota as well, and they have set up Torrance as their national headquarters. We also have other companies such as Standard Brand Paint, Epson, and eventually Computax. But I think other factors that have contributed toward the development in the city has to do with the climate. It is also close to the beach. And for the industry, I would say we're close to Port of LA and Port of Long Beach. And one thing that I should not neglect is the quality of service that we have in Torrance. I think a lot of that would depend on what we do as a city council and the city council that will follow us. As you know, the city of Torrance has run out of space to build new projects. There will have to be some recycling taking place in the older area as Torrance grows older. And any space that we do have, we will have to take a very close look at whether a new project will have a tremendous impact on traffic, parking, whether the density will be acceptable, and also whether the particular project will be compatible with the surrounding area. I think if we were to take all of these things into consideration, then the future generations will be able to enjoy those things that we are enjoying today. And I hope the city council that will follow us will keep that in mind for the future.
And that was another member of Torrance's city council. We'll be hearing two other interviews a little bit later today. But right now on the pavilion, we'll have a little bit more live performance for you. Who's coming up now, Kristen?
Yes, we've got the General Happenings group coming up. They're General Telephone Singers. They were formed in 1972. Tim Emmons is the director of the group. There are currently 10 members in that group, and all members are full-time hourly employees of General Telephone.
So when they're not taking your calls, they're singing somewhere. They think of themselves as goodwill ambassadors and perform at charitable and community service events all throughout Southern California. They aren't the people who reach out and touch, that's the other game in town, but they are the people that hear you. Let's listen now to General Happenings from General Telephone.
Come on, clap along now. Our chords may not work, but you do, right? Come on.
Tonight we're gonna make it happen. Tonight
want you. I'm so excited. Look what you do. I just can't hide. You got me burning up. Oh, I'm so excited. I think you get and I just can't hide. I've got to give it up. Oh, I'm so excited. Look what you do. And I just can't hide. You got me burning up. Oh, I'm so excited. I think you get and I just can't hide. I've got to give it up. And I know. I know he's a boy dreamer. Looks into my eyes, take me to the closet. Who I lose control, can't seem to get enough. When I wake from dreaming, tell me is it really love? How will I know? Just feeling. How will I know? How will I know? Keep deceiving. How will I know? How will I know if he really loves me? I say a prayer with every heartbeat. I fall in love with every beat. I'm asking you, 'cause you know about these things. How will I know if he's thinking of me? I try to phone, but I'm too shy, can't speak. Falling in love, it's all me to see. This love is strong, why do I feel weak? Always I'm shaking, I wish I had you near me now. Said there's no mistaking what I feel is really love. So tell me, how will I know? Feeling, how will I know? Said how will I know? Deep feeling, how will I know? How will I know if he really loves me? I say a prayer with every heartbeat. I fall in love with every beat. I'm asking you, 'cause you know about these things. How will I know if he's thinking of me? I try to phone, but I'm too shy, can't speak. Falling in love, it's all me. This love is strong, why do I feel weak?
Good afternoon, everybody. We are from General Telephone, and we are called the General Happening. We hope you're having a good time so far with us today. See a lot of smiles out there. Let's take this moment so you can meet everybody in the group individually. Let's start right there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Schaefer, and I'm a buildings equipment maintainer from Pomona.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Bob Knight, and I'm a telephone operator from Huntington Beach. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Wong, and I'm a network construction installer from Bellflower.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Rowland. I work network services in Huntington Beach.
Hi there, my name is Carol Gates. I'm from Long Beach and I'm a business rep. Hello, everybody. My name is Monique Fessio. I'm an operator from Thousand Oaks. Hi, I'm Debbie Johnson from Santa Monica and I'm a customer rep. Hi, I'm Mary Borovich. I'm a data clerk from Mentone.
And hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Henry, and I work as a cable splicer in Huntington Beach. Thank you. Now, can we get you to clap your hands with us one time here? Come on, everybody clap along.
Terrific timing, huh?
Well, that's a first.
Upstage by a marching band.
Let me know what football game they're playing at next. We'll be there. I mean, we're going to bring a wall of sound like they've never seen. Okay, as we said earlier, we're from General Telephone, and we all work full-time for the phone company. We get to do this about once or twice a week, and we can play anywhere in the state of California. We do anything to help out communities, just like we're doing today for Torrance. Anything we can do to help raise funds, anything we can do for a philanthropic organization, well, that's what this group is all about. You guys have the easy job. Sit back, stand back, whatever you want to do. Enjoy the show. Sing along if you like. Believe me, if we can drown out a marching band, we'll drown you out. So let's get on with it. Mary, why don't you do something here?
Okay, we'd like to cover as many periods of music that we can, and this one goes back to the 1950s. How many of you remember the 50s? Okay. Well, there's a group out called Manhattan Transfer, and they recreate the 50s sound pretty good. This one's called Trickle Trickle.
Trickle, trickle, splash, splash, tell me how long will this rain last? The rain keeps dropping, there ain't no stopping. Tell me how long will this rain last? Trickle, trickle, stop, stop, just got to see the sea don't drop. She's there waiting, I'm hesitating. Tell me when the rain will stop.
Honey, did my clothes, dear boy, a woman run? Well, you know I'm sure as a tan. Can you lend me your candle? Gotta go to the party, yeah. Please lend me your shirt. If I don't make it, you know I can't fake it. I won't see my baby no more. Oh,
Trickle, trickle, splash, splash, tell me how long will this rain last? The rain keeps dropping, there ain't no stopping. Tell me how long will this rain last? Trickle, trickle, stop, stop, just got to see the sea don't drop. She's there waiting, I'm hesitating. Tell me when this rain will stop.
Ronnie, sweetie, find your boy. I love him so. But if I don't make this party, man, he should have blown. Gotta go to the party, yeah. Please let me your show. Well, if I don't make it, you know I can't fake it. I won't see my baby no more.
Trickle, trickle, splash, splash, tell me how long will this rain last? The rain keeps dropping, there ain't no stopping. Tell me how long will this rain last? Trickle, trickle, stop, stop, just got to see the sea don't drop. She's there waiting, I'm hesitating. Tell me how long will this rain last? Tell me how long will it
Very good.
Thank you. Okay. Well, you sounded like you liked music from the 50s. Do you remember music from the 30s and the 40s, like the McGuire sisters or the Andrews sisters? Yeah, some of you do. Okay. Well, we'll introduce the rest of you to this type of music. So ladies, come up here. We're going to do a song called Lullaby of Broadway, a la the Andrews sisters, and the guys are going to start it.
Come along and listen to the lullaby of Broadway, the hip hooray and ballyhoo, the lullaby of Broadway, rumble of a subway train, the rattle of a taxi, the daffodils who entertain, Angelos and Maxie's when the Broadway baby says goodnight. It's early in the morning, and now baby don't the time until the dawn. Good night, baby. Good night. Milkman's on his way. Do, do, do. Sleep tight, baby. Sleep tight. Let's call it a day.
Hey, come along and listen to the lullaby of Broadway, the hip hooray and ballyhoo, the lullaby of Broadway. The band begins to throw the town, and everyone goes crazy. Rock-a-bye, baby, wow. And everything gets hazy. Hush, bye, bye,
Andrews Sisters.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to try something different. This song comes from a movie that was out last Christmas. And it was a really wonderful movie because it was good not only for adults, but also for children, young children. It was a cartoon about a family of mice. And the name of that movie was The American Tale.
And what we're going to try and do for you today is the theme from that movie, a real pretty ballad that was sung by James Ingram and Linda Ronstadt. And well, hey, we're going to take a shot at it now. It's called Somewhere Out There.
Somewhere out there, beneath the pale moonlight, someone's thinking of me and loving me tonight.
Somewhere out there, someone's saying a prayer that we'll find one another in that big somewhere out there. And even though I know how very far apart we are, it helps to think we might be wishing on the same bright star.
And when the night wind starts to sing a lonesome lullaby, it helps to think we're sleeping underneath the same big sky. Somewhere out there, if love can see us through, then we'll be together. Somewhere out there, out where dreams come true.
Even though I know how very far apart we are, it helps to think we might be wishing on the same bright star.
And when the night wind starts to sing a lonesome lullaby, it helps to think we're sleeping underneath the same big sky. Somewhere out there, love can see us through. Then we'll be together. Somewhere out there, out where dreams come true.
Thank you.
Okay, a little earlier we did a song that was kind of reminiscent of the Andrews Sisters. What we wanted to do now was move into the 80s and do a song by a sister group out of the 80s. Now, who out there can name a sister group that's popular in the 80s? Who said Twisted Sister? You guys are a strange bunch. Would you believe the Pointer Sisters? Yeah, why not? We thought we'd do a couple of songs by then. Here we go.
Jump for my love, jump in next to me. Oh, I come alive. Your love feels so right. Oh, it feels so right to me and you with me tonight. Jump. Jump in if you wanna take my kisses in the night. Then jump, 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 jump. Ooh yeah. You know my heart. You know my heart. You happy, happy. Jump. You know these arms will fill you up. Jump in if you wanna take my kisses in the night. Then jump, jump. Oh my love. Jump in. Wanna take it anymore. Loud display right behind the door. Just time to stop and get away. 'Cause I work so hard to make it every day. Woo-hoo. Woo-hoo. Money falling from the sky. 'Cause a man took my heart and brought me blind. But I must say, someone stole my brand new Chevrolet. And the rent is due and I got no place to stay. Ooh-hoo. Ooh-hoo. And it's hard to say just how some things never change. And it's hard to find, and it's straight to draw the line. Oh, I'm just burning through the neutron dance. I'm just burning through the neutron dance. Well, I'm on fire, ooh yeah. Well, I'm on fire, yeah. And it's hard to say just how some things never change. And it's hard to find, and it's straight to draw the line. I'm just burning through the neutron dance. I'm just burning through the neutron dance. I know there's a particle for me. All I've got to do is just believe. Oh, doing the neutron dance. I'm just burning. Doing the neutron dance. Woo! I'm so happy. Doing the neutron dance. I'm just burning. Doing the neutron dance. Woo!
The Pointer Sisters.
Thank you. Okay. How many of you would like to see the guys dance? Yeah? Come on up here, guys. Oh, that's right. We're pipless today. Oh. There's a song we're going to do that goes back to the 50s style.
Oh.
And this one reminds me of Gladys Knight and the Pips. Do you remember that group? Okay. Now, you have to pretend I'm Gladys Knight, okay? You have to pretend these fellas are the Pips.
We're pipless today, though.
That's all right. You can handle
We
it.
only got 2 pips today.
We're short a Pip, but we're
short
going
a
to do
Pip.
it.
No.
Boy from New York City.
Ooh-ah, kitty, tell us about the boy from New York City. Ooh-ah, come on, kitty, tell us about the boy from New York City.
He's really fine. And someday I hope to make him mine, oh mine. And he's neat and oh so sweet.
job, guys. Thank you.
And lousy dancer. So Bob is going to sing this one for you. And like I said, I think you'll recognize the song. Jitterbug. 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 Jitterbug.
Into my heart, send the soul sky high when your love it starts. Jitterbug into my brain, yeah, yeah. Goes a bang, bang, bang till my feet do the same. Something's bugging me, something ain't right. My best friend told me what you did last night. You left me sleeping in my bed. I was dreaming, but I should have been with you instead. Wake me up before you go. Don't leave me hanging on like a yo-yo. Wake me up before you go. I don't wanna miss when you hit that high. Wake me up before you go. Cause I'm not planning on going solo. Wake me up before you go. Take me dancing tonight. I wanna hit that high. Yeah, yeah. You took the cold skies out of my way. You made the sun shine brighter than a Doris Day. You turned a bright spark into a flame. Yeah, yeah. I mean, spur many things just ain't been the same. I shot my lady out your eye. Makes me crazy when you act so cool. Come on, baby, let's not fight. We'll go dancing. Everything will be alright. Wake me up before you go. Leave me hanging on like a yo-yo. Wake me up before you go. I don't wanna miss you when you hit that. Wake me up before you go. Cause I'm not planning on going solo. Wake me up before you go. Take me dancing tonight. I wanna hit that high. Cold out there, but it's warm in bed. Take it down. We'll stay at home instead. Jitterbug. Wake me up before you go. Leave me hanging on like a yo-yo. Wake me up before you go. I don't wanna miss you when you hit that high. Wake me up before you go, cause I'm not planning on going solo. Wake me up before you go out. Take me dancing tonight. Wake me up before you go. Leave me hanging on like a yo-yo. Wake me up before you go. I don't wanna miss you when you hit that high. Wake me up before you go, cause I'm not planning on going solo. Wake me up before you go out. Take me dancing tonight. Wake me up before you go, cause I'm not planning on going solo. Wake me up before you go out. Take me dancing tonight.
Oh, I'm glad that one's over. We didn't know what side of the post to go on here. We almost had a casualty in the middle of the show. We would like to close our show today, folks, with a song that we've been closing all of our shows with for the entire 16 years that this group has been together. There's a good reason we keep doing the same songs over and over, or the same closing. It's because of the words to the song. What we ask of you is real simple. Listen to the words. Hopefully you'll be able to carry some of this with you for the rest of the day. And have a great time out here. Once again, on behalf of General Telephone, thanks for inviting us. And let's do it again next year, maybe, huh? Thanks a lot.
Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place.
the General Happening from General Telephone.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Okay, that was the General Happenings from General Telephone. They really did a terrific job today.
And as City Cable 22's coverage of Torrance's 75th anniversary continues, we now turn you over to Pat Newton and Darrell Wright to continue this afternoon's commentary. We'll be back with you a little bit later. We're going to take a look at what else is going on here at Wilson Park.
Well, thank you very much, Michael and Krista, and I'm Pat Newton along with Darrell Wright, and welcome once again to the 75th anniversary special here from Wilson Park. Darrell, have you had a chance to check out any of the pavilions yet?
Well, sure have. I went back here behind, and there was a small museum of natural history and some of the different events, boutiques and such set up with information about the history of Torrance. Over off of Washington Street, we have, of course, the picnic area where the ribs and chicken and such are happening. And we had the Torrance band over there a little while ago.
Well, right now we had a chance to catch up with Councilman Dan Walker, and we have Dan's interview coming up right now.
Well, Torrance is a balanced community, and the fact that the city took an aggressive stance and actually went out and worked to get the retail establishments to headquarter in Torrance. There's a great deal of effort that took place in bringing Sears and Roebuck and the mall to the city of Torrance. There was a great deal of effort in bringing the car dealers to Torrance. And it was because of those things that we had the tax revenues to develop the fine police department and fire department and the other city services that our people rely on. So I think if we look at one major factor in the success of the city of Torrance, it's that when some of the other communities around us didn't want the commercial development, that we willingly accepted it. And those communities now are crying for tax dollars, and we, on the other hand, have the utilization of those dollars for the benefit of the people of the city of Torrance. Well, I think the city of Torrance is going to continue to be one of the finest places to live and work, to raise your children, to grow old in. I'm very pleased that we are building senior housing. We're aggressive when it comes to the commercial development, the maintenance of our commercial development in the city. The east side of our city is being redeveloped now with clean industrial, non-polluting industrial. And when we look at all that is going on Western Avenue, when we look at the success of the community, I think we can just amplify that. Torrance it's the hub of the South Bay now, and it will continue to be the hub of the South Bay. And when 20 years from now you tell someone in Tacoma or in upstate New York that you come from Torrance, California, they'll know where that is. We will be the successful part of the LA Basin. We'll have a beautiful lifestyle as we do now. We'll have a very fine residential community, which we have now, and we will have the industrial and commercial base developing the tax revenues to pay for the services that we demand.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that interview. Well, how about the general happenings this afternoon?
They were great. Just a great group of singers, men and women.
You know, it's funny. I don't generally when I get an operator, they don't sound anything like that. If I can get through to one, these are great. Everybody should be like that. Well, right now we had a chance to catch up with Councilman Mark Worth, and Councilman Worth's interview is upcoming, so stay with us.
Well, in my job, I happen to spend a lot of time driving around the city, and as I look at what makes Torrance a good place to live today in 1987, I think there's one development that stands out to me as having great historical significance. I think that the city leaders of their time showed great forethought and wisdom and expanding the boundaries of the city beyond the original borders. That has allowed many things to happen. I think first of all, it's made Torrance big enough that it's a good city where we can have our own services, we don't have to contract with the county, and that means that I think that we have a better quality of service that we provide our citizens with. Expanding the boundaries of the city beyond Crenshaw, west of Hawthorne, has given us an area to develop in that's enhanced the city. It's given us the Hawthorne Boulevard corridor, which has had great economic benefit for the city, and in turn great tax benefit for the city. And those tax benefits have gone to help the whole city, and the citizens enjoy the benefit of that. And I think also most important, looking at that decision to go beyond the original boundaries, is that it provided the open space over many years that gave us the neighborhoods, the tracts of homes that we see all through the city. And you look today at those tracts of homes and those neighborhoods, and that's a big reason why people decide to come and live in Torrance. We have right here the epitome of the American dream, the beautiful neighborhoods with the homes that are very special to people.
What about?
Well, I think it's hard to predict the future. Looking at past predictions, we sometimes laugh or they turn out to be terribly wrong, but it's kind of fun to try to predict what's going to happen. And I think that we do have certain things that can help us make maybe educated guesses. We know from SCAGs, from studies at SCAG and other type of agencies, that we are going to face massive growth in Southern California and of course growth in Torrance too. And so that means that the future of Torrance is really going to depend on how we deal with that growth. We're very well aware of that now, but as we have more and more growth, we can take two paths. We can either deal and manage that growth so that we continue to have a quality of life, or we can lose control of it and have our city turn into the kind of community that we see elsewhere that we don't find particularly desirable. I think also, as far as the future goes, we're going to be impacted by world events. Obviously, things such as the aerospace industry are very important to our city. And if there's changes in the economy, changes in employment, then that's going to affect us too. So it's hard to say, but with right decisions and with good luck, we're going to continue to have a good future.
Thanks very much for that informative interview with Councilman Wirth. Stay with us this afternoon. Coming up pretty soon, we have the 75th anniversary cake cutting, and with 75 years, they've cooked a heck of a cake, so stick with us. I know Darren and I are going to go up there and enjoy that. Also coming up later in the afternoon, we've got the Torrance Chorale, and Torrance Chorale is no stranger to this park.
No, it's not. It's performed here many times before, and it's full of a lot of dedicated and loyal Torrance residents. They're singing away their hearts and minds.
And speaking of Torrance, how about time for another trivia question? Michael and Kristen said that they were going over very well this morning, so we're going to stay with it. During World War I, this is a category from 1914 to 1918 on Indian workers. During World War I, Llewellyn Iron Works hired about 150 Indians from Arizona and New Mexico to man the hills because they reportedly could handle the intense heat from the blast furnaces better than Caucasian workers.
And speaking of the Torrance Chorale, we have early recreation here in Torrance. Recreation and leisure activities, though limited, were important to the early community. Walter Wren's Motion Picture House, located on the ground floor of the Myrtle Apartments, opened in the late 1912 with the silent movie The Perils of Pauline. Go ahead.
The Torrance Co-Rec Club is throwing a haunted dance night on Friday, October 23rd from 7:30 to 10 p.m. at the Torrance Recreation Center. There'll be games, refreshments, and prizes for the best costumes, so be sure you're dressed to kill. Admission is $2 for members, $5 for non-members, and members in costume are admitted at half price. That's the Co-Ed Recreation Halloween Dance, Friday, October 23rd. For more information, call the Torrance Parks and Recreation Department at 618-2930. Well, stay with us because, like we said, we've got the Torrance Chorale coming up, and we've enjoyed them at the various 4th of July celebrations over the last couple of years. Also coming up next, we have the art display. So let's go now to the art display where our cameras had a chance to take a look at some of the pavilions earlier this morning.
We're under the 10 here at Wilson Park, and a little later on today, hot air balloons, but I think they're making the balloons a little earlier under the tent. What's going on here?
What we do is the kids get a chance to decorate their own hot air balloon, and then we give them a balloon, and it's like a miniature one for them to keep, I guess.
Indeed, and we're preparing the strings to the balloon. Now, what are you making? Indeed, you've got some markers on the hot air balloon. Oh, I see you're putting your names on it as well. Oh, it's beautiful. Indeed, what color is that?
Blue.
Blue, and so those will be the strings holding up the balloons. Are you all volunteers from the Recreation Department?
I'm on youth council, so I'm kind of a volunteer. She works for the city.
For the city, what are some other things that the Recreation Department is doing today?
I don't know, we're just doing the arts, the crafts for the kids. We're going to make puppets and other projects too. And there's face painting over there.
Indeed, we'll take a look at the face painting. We'll walk around this area here. Hi, putting on the glue here for the balloon.
Uh-huh.
What are other things the Recreation Department is involved in the 75th anniversary?
Well, they're just selling, stuff that's, I don't know. And we're just doing crafts here.
Indeed, what's your name?
Eric.
Eric, looks pretty nice. You've got your name on the sides of this hot air balloon. Will you be riding in the hot air balloon later on today?
Yeah.
Indeed. Are you doing other crafts also?
Yeah, I've done one of the paintings over there.
Uh-huh. Do you participate in other Recreation Department activities around the year?
I play basketball, and I used to play piano.
Really? What park did you play basketball?
You mean what position?
Or what did you play for a park in town?
Oh, I played for school.
Oh, very good. Very good. Thank you, Eric. Good luck, indeed. Arts and crafts here under the tent. We'll go back up to all the fine folks here at Wilson Park.
Well, Derek, that was definitely an interesting exhibit.
Yeah, it was.
Speaking of some other interesting things and some other things in the entertainment industry, there goes our director. We had a chance to take a look at some of Torrance's finest youth band members from the Torrance Unified School District. So let's take a look now at the Torrance Unified School District's bands. Definitely got a lot of musical talent coming up through the wings.
Absolutely. I saw some of them performing over there just a little while ago. It was just excellent. And of course, we did have one of those Torrance Unified bands walking through earlier during the General Happening Singers. We got an opportunity to enjoy both performances at once there.
You know, that was a resilient effort by the GTE singers. They stuck right with it.
They did stick right with it. That's all part of the spirit of performing.
I think they're coming at us now. No, just kidding. Well, what have we got up next, Eric?
Well, I wanted to tell you that running a city the size of Torrance is serious business. To get the behind-the-scenes action, to find out what really goes on in the corridors of power, there's only one program you can turn to, Update. Update brings you interviews with the people that keep our city on its feet, and you can only get that kind of information here on City Cable 22. Check your program guide for air times.
Well, welcome back once again to our city's 75th anniversary special. And what better way of kicking off the party than to go to the Torrance Chorale? So let's take a look now at the Torrance Chorale.
This is my
The year is 1929. A young lawyer returns to his alma mater where he finds himself dreaming wistfully of a lost love, of a girl he had wooed during his college days. Alone in a quietly secluded spot beside the campus spooning wall, the now maturing young man hears a melody. Its inspiration, the star-filled skies above. The melody would become one of the best loved of all time, Stardust. Its youthful writer would leave the practice of law to become one of America's most innovative creators of popular song. Remember now, as we present Hoagie Carmichael, a choral portrait.
the Torrance Chorale, as usual, a very hot act.
Absolutely wonderful performance. Speaking of hot acts, as I pick up the cue here from Pat.
Well, absolutely the worst segue ever done.
We're going to take a look now at some of the Torrance Fire Department demonstrations that were here earlier today at the picnic.
And stay with us after this because we'll be back to cut the cake. Welcome back once again to the 75th birthday party celebration live from Wilson Park. Darrett, 75 years is an awful long time.
Awful long time indeed, and on the west side of our park here today we have the Model T and A Ford cars and many of the different types of cars from the early days here in the city of Torrance.
Hi, everybody. Here, Mike Cohen here. Beautiful car. It's a Model A Ford, regularly $24.95. We're going to let it go today for $15.50. Or is that not enough? Ken Colley?
Enough right now.
What does one of these babies go for if you were to let this off a lot?
About $8,000.
$8,000. This is Ken Colley of the Harbor Area Model A Restorers Club. Model A, which means 1928 and on. Is that correct?
1928 to 31. 31 was the last year the Model A came out.
Really, what does it take to restore a Model A?
It takes quite a bit of work. Take them down to the frame and restore the frame and ground up restoration.
Now, there are a bunch of Model A cars here and Model T cars at Wilson Park for the 75th anniversary. Now, the Model Ts came before the Model A?
Yes, the Model Ts came out in about 1909, and they went to 1927.
And then after that, the Model A's...
The Model A came out to 28 to 31, and then the 32 came out.
And these are all built by Ford?
All built by Henry Ford.
Really, when did GM and Dodge become a part of the auto industry?
I don't know correctly what year they did, but we've got one Dodge on display down here, an early Dodge.
And so this is a Model A. Want to describe it from the camera angle here? This is original equipment?
It's an accessory item that they had back in the Model A days.
Really? Now these cars have rumble seats as well?
Yes. One next door to us belongs to Ralph Woods, and he hauls the grandkids in the back in the rumble seat. Woody was the president of our club for 4 years.
And why the restoration of classic cars? What is the interest in this?
We've always had an interest in old cars. I was raised back in Arkansas, and I've liked Model A Ford since I was a little kid. And when I came to California, I got in the Restorers Club in 1969.
And the fascination with cars, a lot of folks lining up along here, seeing them, the Model A's, the Model T's, and even some of the more modern race cars. What is it about the automobile?
It just it's just a pleasure to drive them on weekends. We just enjoy having the old cars.
Having conversation with Ken Colley here, Harbor Area Model A Restorers Club. Ken, thank you. Will you be driving any of these cars soon?
I'll be driving some of the dignitaries around in the parade. And we got Bob O'Kane down this a little ways farther. He worked for the Torrance Water Department. A real nice gentleman.
Indeed.
He invited us to bring the cars over today.
Well, I'd like to own a couple of those cars. Those are our classic as we celebrate the 75th anniversary special today.
Absolutely.
Live in Wilson Park.
I'll tell you that we're coming up on the cake cutting ceremonies here, and some of our people involved with that will be the Marine Corps Color Guard, the Torrance Youth Band, and the Master of Ceremonies will be Jim Armstrong. Welcome address will be by Mayor Katie Geisert, and the keynote speaker will be Paul Moyer.
Let's go right now and take a look at the cake cutting ceremonies and hope somebody brings us over some cake. Let's go right now.
And now, joining us in car number 2, Mr. Mike Randall, Mr. Tom Sullivan, and Mr. Paul Moyer, class of '58, Torrance High School. Gentlemen, welcome. And greeting our guests is Miss Torrance Renee Kennett. Say again. Good. And in the third car, ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful A Derby is a distinguished resident of Torrance who was here when there were just no more than a few hundred, Mr. George Probert. Probert comes as a young boy to Torrance, born out of state but raised here, and all his life here as well. We're delighted to have George with us today. Sorry. Stand by, we can open up chairs. And now joining us, a contemporary of George, by golly, Mr. Russell White. He's been here almost beginning too. Come on out, Russ, join us. You know, George and Russell represent all of that great generation of the founding fathers of the city. These are people who could tell you what Jared City Torrance looked like and how he wore a straw hat and who the first of this was and what the second of that was. Look at that, Russell. Hats away, Russell. Next we have, let's see here, distinguished member of the City Council, Mr. Tim Mock, and I'm crossed up because driving Tim Mock is the distinguished city treasurer, Mr. Tom Rupert, and that's his Model T. Timmy? Tom, it's beautiful. It's handsomer than the driver, Tom, I'll tell you. In the next car, distinguished council lady, the Honorable Dee Hardison. Dee? Oh, you're supposed to jump when he does that. Miller calls that an ooga. And here, this car leaning slightly to the right side, the starboard list, distinguished member of the City Council, the Honorable Bill Applegate. And the last of our parade, but by no means the least, gentlemen, in this beautiful Model A four-door, 2 council members, the Honorable George Nakano, the Honorable Mark Worth. Gentlemen, welcome. Hey, all right, look out. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. And now, before we go any further, I'd like to be sure that we have all those who ought to be here up here. Those of you who are Jared City Torrance winners from this year or last, or the past years, those of you who are in that 75-year-old resident circle, please, please, if we missed, come on, join us if you will. Here we go. My golly. All right. Again, the guys back on their flyover, that return leg. I watched. Some are World War I reproductions, others reproductions from the 20s. At one point in Torrance Airport, there was stored a SPAD, the kind of thing that Eddie Rickenbacker flew. These gentlemen have graciously agreed to take part in our celebration. Louis said he'd wear one of those things right in the rear cockpit. Louis said he'd wear one of those, white scarves, curse you Red Baron kind of hats, and go from there. Well, let's do it. It's a great day. It's a great day. I can't tell you what we thought about when yesterday they were saying 70% and 80% chance of rain. But I can tell you that we have a tremendous group of people who can accommodate and adjust. If you can believe it, this program was scheduled until 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon for that gazebo over there. And these arrangements and all the entertainment you've seen been made in the last few hours. Inside your program, you're going to find a listing of the 75th Anniversary Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Geisert, and with her sitting on that, Councilwoman Hardison and Councilman Walker. The rest of us are there as well. Look at those names, and when you see those people, thank them. They're a great group. I'd like to have a great round of applause for the people who helped plan this day and the people who helped put it together. Let's hear it. Now, I've been in politics long enough to know you get into hazardous business when you start making lists and reading names. But you've just got to take a shot at the community organizations, the Historical Society, and the Friends of the Marsh, and the Roseville people, and Sister City, and the volunteers, and the service clubs, and the veterans clubs. A whole range of people who come together in the fine community spirit that's known in Torrance as the Torrance Spirit to make these things happen. So we're delighted that you're all here and sharing in the good fun. And it's now my pleasure to present to you a good friend and a member of our planning committee. He is the editor-publisher of the Torrance Area Television Facts, TV Facts magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a nice welcome for Mr. Mike Randall. Michael?
Thank you, Jim. This is really exciting, and it's not raining. It gives me great pleasure at this time to present the United States Marine Corps Color Guard. Now, this is a very special color guard because they are the official color guard for the Los Angeles Raiders, and I know there's a lot of Raider fans out there because I see the hats on. So they perform at the Coliseum, and early this year, they were the official color guard for Super Bowl 21. In addition, one of the sergeants is our very own. He is Sergeant Jeff Williams. He is the Torrance recruiting sergeant right down the street on Sepulveda and Hawthorne. And looking out here, there may be a few young men and women who just would like to join the Marine Corps, so you can see Sergeant Williams afterwards. I'm sure he'd be happy to get your name. So at this time, I would like to have everyone kindly stand and remain standing as we present our colors of the United States. And afterwards, we're very happy to have Tom Sullivan, our good friend and neighbor, who will sing the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen.
A nation is best reflected by the spirit shown in its people and by its cities. None better reflects the qualities that this nation needs to reflect in the next century than this day and this city, and this anthem's appropriate. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight all the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Please be seated. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to present to you the mayor of the city of Torrance, and the distinguished and gracious lady, the Honorable Katie Geiser.
Thank you, Jim. And Tom Sullivan, I'm touched. It's been a long time since I've heard anything quite as stirring or beautiful as that. And certainly in joining and welcoming you here today, I will tag on to what Tom has said. The greatness of our country lies in the greatness of our cities. The greatness of our cities, of course, depends upon the greatness of our people. The people of Torrance are people of great spirit and great heart. We are so pleased that so many of you came out today to join together. This is your city, and to wish yourselves happy birthday. Torrance has come from very humble beginnings, has become a very large and sophisticated city. We are still not so big and so sophisticated that we can't come together and celebrate our community and our sense of community. So once again, happy birthday. We're delighted to have you here. It's now my pleasure to introduce another Torrance boy who's made good, Paul Moyer, and of course you're used to seeing him as the anchor man on Channel 7. Paul graduated from high school in Torrance in 1958 from Torrance High School, and I found out just recently he delivered our Daily Breeze when he was a boy, and so that's kind of humbling. You talk about humble beginnings. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Paul Moyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I was hoping you wouldn't mention the year 1958, but I was very young when I graduated, I've got to tell you. We moved to Torrance in 1950. I was about, 10 years old. We moved to the Hollywood Riviera section of Torrance when there was only about 10 houses on that whole hill. I delivered the Daily Breeze for about 3 years, and I hope that yours got there every night. I know that sometimes some of the papers didn't make it. My remembrances of this town and this city are baseball at Torrance High School, drag racing, my 1951 Ford down Pacific Coast Highway, drag racing, my 1955 Chevy on Hawthorne Boulevard when you could still do that. And I remember that my stepdad, Doug Moyer, along with a gentleman by the name of Norm Hawkins, were two people who almost double-handedly started Little League Baseball in Torrance back in the early and mid-50s. And I remember digging that field. I think it was on Sepulveda. And I remember my mom cooking hot dogs back there while we played the games. And I remember 1954 as a freshman at Torrance High School being scared to death because when you were freshmen, they either smeared you with lipstick or if they really didn't like you, they took your pants off and run them up the flagpole. Luckily, I just got smeared. I remember the baseball team. I won't go into all the names. Is there anybody here that graduated from Torrance High School in 1958? Well, those people are probably so old they couldn't get here today. But I remember the baseball team. I remember names like Gene Crenshaw and the Vanderpool brothers and Toby Venable and Lee Day and some of those guys. And I remember we had a hell of a team for about 3 years. And I remember graduating from Torrance High School and we had an all-night party at Long Beach at the Civic Auditorium. And we stayed up all night. And I remember this very well because the next morning after staying up all night, we got in somebody's car and drove to Torrance Beach at the parking lot there, and we sat there. And as the sun came up, we said, okay, now what the hell do we do? We're out of high school. What do we do now? And we agreed to meet there 10 years later. We didn't, but I've seen a few of those people since then. Suffice to say that my remembrances of the city of Torrance when I was a kid was a working town, an industrial town, a town full of really nice people, working people. And I've worked in a lot of parts of this country, and I'll tell you something, the reputation that Southern California has is one of people laying around on the beach driving sports cars down Hollywood Boulevard. You know what it is. But if they were here today and they saw the people of this city gathered here to celebrate the 75th birthday of the city of Torrance, they would know, as I do, that this is still a town of working people and a town of good people, and most importantly, a town of family people. And as I look around, I really see that. And I thank you all for being here, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of the 75th birthday for the city of Torrance. You always remember where you came from, and I always will. Thank you very much.
I'd like to have Will Berger join us if he's here. Coach? Willard, where are you? I spoke to him, wanted him here. Come on up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're delighted to be here with you all and have all of us here together. I'd like to make some special introductions to now. These are good people that you've known by name or reputation. If you haven't, you should have come to know them. And I've lost the list, but that's all right. We'll do it anyway. And thank you, Paul. Is that how they do it when you lose a script? They just reach, a hand comes out and hands it to you? That's it. Thank you very much. I'll tell you, joining us on the stage, he just missed his car, was Councilman Dan Walker. And as well, I mentioned our city treasurer, Tom Rupert, driving by in the magnificent Model T, but also on stage is our city clerk, the Honorable Dr. Don Wilson. Now here's where I get in a little trouble. Because I just want to have you, don't want to miss anyone. The city began the Jared City Torrance Community Service Awards 2 or 3 years ago. There have been 10 recipients, some of those posthumously, and some of them are with us here today, and I want to present them to you now. The Jared City Torrance Award is for lifetime dedication and service to the community. So let's see if we can introduce some of these people. One of the first award winners, Mr. Harville Gutenfelder. Harv? And with him is his wife, Margaret. And we have, and I just don't, Dr. Hardwood, I guess, is blessedly still alive, not with us today. But we do have with us from the 1987 class, Ms. Polly Watt. And a great and good friend of mine, a most distinguished gentleman, record holder in many ways, including the longest tenure of service on the bench of the Superior Court in California. He's slowed down there. If you know what's good for you, make way for him. His Honor, Superior Court Judge John A. Scheidler. John Scheidler, come up here, Your Honor. Come on, John. Hey, look at that guy go. Oh, wait. I don't mind, but the guy who handles the insurance policy for the city goes absolutely crazy. I love it. Great. I'm told that the daughter of the first dentist in Torrance with us today, Betty Woodman. Betty Neelan Woodman. Betty, where are you? Right there. Hey, come on. Show us that there it is. Her dad was the first dentist in the city. Great. Come on up here and join us. I do have a good friend of mine who's sitting back here in the back row. He was on the city council in 1953. The Honorable Al Jackson. Stand up there, Al, and wave it. Okay. Yes, I have. And, you know, there's some confusion about the birthday thing because the city was founded, and that's the anniversary we celebrate this year, 1911, 1912, and then became a public corporation in 1921. So we really have two birthdays. Some years ago, in 1970, 71, there was the celebration of the 50th birthday of the city. That's true. And just a short time later, here we are. But since the mid-50s, we've elected our mayors at large, and there's only 3 of us now. And one of them is my very good friend who was here earlier entertaining the folks, the Honorable Ken Miller. He's back there. Ken has a distinction of being born in this city, raised here, and then became it's a member of the city council, member of the mayor as well. Yeah, 75 years ago. Now somebody's going to have to help me out there, Barbara, because I've got people back here that I don't have the list on. Oh, Mrs. Wilson is with us. Yes. Ah, okay. One of the award winners the other night was awarded posthumously the first superintendent of schools of the Torrance Unified School District, founded in 1947, Dr. John Heinrich Hull, Hank Hull, my first boss. And with us today is Doris Hull Wilson. Doris, say hello. I don't know, I'm in trouble, but I figure what the hell, you can't vote for me anymore anyway. I'm leaving someone out. I don't know where you are. Help me out. Jerry Alter is here. Jerry Alter has been around for early. I asked Jerry. Jerry's on the Water Commission now. Jerry, stand up. You know Jerry Alter. I said to Jerry and I served in the Planning Commission together. I said, Jerry, he's on the Water Commission now. I said, Jerry, how long have you been in Torrance? He said, before water. Not quite. And I'm remiss if I don't introduce to you the city attorney. He is the city attorney of the longest tenure of any city attorney of any city of any size in Los Angeles County. I'm proud to call him my friend, and he's a friend of all of you as well, the Honorable Stanley Remmelmeyer. Stanley. And we're going to bring George Probert and Russell back down here in a few minutes to help cut the cake. I'm helping out. Huh? Yeah, I did that. Okay. So far. No, not yet. Not yet. We're going to save you, George. The other day in the South Bay New Times, they published an historical edition. Some of you have seen it. It's a great keepsake. If you haven't picked one up, do so today. But one of the cutouts was an old phone directory page. Old phone directory page. And there weren't very many telephones. They had funny numbers like 2 or 4J. And one of the numbers was for a Mr. Samuel Levy. I've forgotten the number, but my very good friend and his daughter and one who loves Torrance so is with us. 289, she says, Ella Schwartz. Ella. Dear lady. George Stevens, was he able to join us? No, George Stevens was the first city manager of the city in 1948 and was recently awarded the City Torrance Award. Now, Barbara, wherever you are, I'm gonna miss someone, so help me out, feed me the papers. Katie's gonna feed me the papers. I'd like to introduce to you now in her own right, a lovely lady who represents us at wakes and weddings and all of these fancy affairs. This year's Miss Torrance, Renee Kenneth. Just stand. Hello. Just wave. That's all you have to do. Isn't she lovely? We have one of the great school districts in the state. The city, is about the 10th largest in the state, about the 100th largest in the country. And representing our school board today is its president, Ms. Ann Gallagher, and with her, the Honorable Carol O'Brien. Back here. Ladies, say hello. Oh, everybody on stage there. Turned over. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm sorry. Got these people already. Terrific. We have Glenn and Laverne Pearman, who are with us, who are pioneers as well. Glenn, he was up here. And Shirley Russell. Shirley? Back there. All right, Shirley, bless your heart. Thank you for being with us. Okay, I don't need this page. Terrific. Rachel Osteroff. Rachel, where are you? There you are. My goodness. Good to see you. You know, if you were here earlier, you were privileged to meet with Ken Miller as he was chatting with Louie and Pete Zamperini and their mother, Mrs. Zamperini. And now they've gone on to another commitment today, but my understanding is that Miss Zamperini shares something in common with us today. Today is Mrs. Zamperini's 90th birthday. Isn't that right? 90th birthday. We have another distinguished resident who, John Schuyler tells me, with her all things are possible. Without her, he's going to be on the bench. Mrs. John A. Schuyler, the lovely Rosemary DeCamp Schuyler. Rosemary? Oh, there you are over there. Oh, back there with a beautiful hat. I love the hat. All right. Well, I didn't miss very many people. You know, not much. There's a lot of city commissioners out there and city officials and police captains. Be careful where you're standing and maybe standing next to an undercover police officer. That's all right. Behave yourself. A lot of good folks, but mostly are all good Torrance people. And that's what brings us together and holds us together and unites us together. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present for the purpose of a special presentation to Mayor Geisick, our supervisor from the 4th District, the Honorable Dean Dana.
As your county supervisor, it's a great honor to be here today to celebrate this 75th anniversary of the city of Torrance. My colleagues on the Board of Supervisors are pleased to present this plaque today to the city of Torrance. Torrance, the outstanding balanced city in the county of Los Angeles. Balanced city, of course, means a city of balanced industrial, business, and residential growth and development dedicated to the quality of life of its citizens. And you certainly have that and have an outstanding city that we all are proud of. Thank you. And Katie, I'd like to present this plaque in commemoration.
Supervisor Dana, on behalf of the people, cut it off. Would like to thank you for this beautiful plaque, and we'll put it on display for all of you to see after the cake cutting, and we'll hang it in City Hall. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. All right, people, we're gonna move it now, but I would like one more time, all of those of you who volunteered today to help, all of those of you who sat on the committee, all of you there, raise your hands. Where are you? Out there. All the people who work for the great city of Torrance, raise your hands. All the people who live in the great city of Torrance, raise your hands. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be time pretty soon before they melt. Here we go. Youth band? Russ Lumley? No, that's not it. Lovely girls doing it today. It's time for the magic song. Torrance Chorale, Don Finn. Lined up if you're ready to go. Okay, they're going to play a special number now. If you think you know what it is, just join in. Don't be shy about the language or the words. Mouth fake it, you know, if you don't know the words. Go. All right, anytime. Say to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Torrance. Happy birthday to you. Hey, all right. Katie, members of the council, Paul, Tommy, can we ask you down and go through the cake cutting? There it is. Yeah, let's do it. Go running. We're running out of time. She did. You get on the. Yeah. These lovely cakes, you know, the list's available. I can't begin to tell you how many bakers in town helped, but we're going to have a ceremony of cake cutting, and there's cake, we hope, for everybody. Not here, but all about. Yeah, they're going to slice. Bill is ready. What are you guys doing? Let's go. Get on there, slice them. Hey. George Probert is going down with Mayor Geisert, and Russ White with Barbara. They're going to be part of the ceremonial. Cake cutting, an historic occasion. It's difficult for you to see where you are, but on my left, at the official cake which bears the 75th birthday logo, George Probert and Mayor Geisert and Russ White and Supervisor Dana, all to make the ceremonial slice. Over here, City Council doing their number. On the far right, Councilman Mock and City Treasurer Rupert. All right, that's the slice. Good, great. All right, coming up soon, right next will be the drawings. I want you to be a part of that.
Well, Derek and I have certainly had a great afternoon, and right about now it's time for us to wrap up, so we're going to go and enjoy the rest of the festivities. We'll go back to Michael and Kristen.
Last group we're going to hear today is Lumberjazz. The group's been around for about 5 years, and there are 17 members in that band. Most have been with the group since the very beginning, and the type of music they play is big band. They also play swing. Michael?
That's an interesting variety for a group called Lumberjazz. Their first
it is.
performance was on Groundhog Day, and perhaps that's appropriate for a group called Lumberjazz. It was at Del Amo Mall, which is, by the way, one of the second largest shopping malls in the world. I know I've been lost in there a couple of times. They rehearse about twice a month, and they perform throughout Southern California, civic functions and private. Now, they're setting up right now. We should be beginning to hear their first selection in just a couple of moments. We want to thank you for joining us here at City Cable 22's cablecast coverage of Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration. We hope you've enjoyed the coverage, and we hope to see more of you watching more of us here on City Cable.
Today, setting up since 8 o'clock this morning. We've watched the people of Torrance celebrate their 75th anniversary. We've enjoyed all sorts of events today, from the red car rides to the marching bands, the Historical Society's contributions, the general happenings, the Torrance Chorale, and especially Lumberjazz.
And we'd like to take this opportunity to thank the City Cable 22 support staff, technical staff. Thank Mike Cohen for bouncing about here at Wilson Park and doing the interviews with people you saw earlier. Darren Wright and Pat Newton for sitting in the middle of the afternoon with the other live acts and other interviews you saw. And generally rounding out the show, we hope you've enjoyed this coverage. We have, for City Cable 22, I'm Michael Ellington.
And I'm Kristen Pond. Thank you for joining us.
You have been watching City Cable 22's coverage of Torrance's 75th anniversary celebration. Check City Guide for a playback of today's highlights. Thank you for joining us today, and happy 75th anniversary, Torrance.
Well, after that formal introduction, we'd like to introduce ourselves. We're Lumberjazz, and there. I'd like to thank you for inviting us to play here. We travel all the way from Alaska to come down here to Torrance, and we only really get down here at least once a year. We always we have a contingent that marches the Armed Forces Day Parade in May, and we always enjoy that. But anyways, we'd like to thank the city of Torrance for arranging this Alaska-like weather for us today. We feel right at home. So thank you very much, and we've got a few more songs to play for you.